Sometimes the most effective forms of technical analysis can also be the simplest. This is certainly true of trend lines, and in my trading I often find a simple trend line break on a daily or weekly time frame can be a great way of limiting and defining risk on a trade. In this video, I'm going to show you how to draw a trend line and, importantly, what to do when that trend line seems to have been broken but you're not quite sure. I'm going to isolate the different factors you need to draw a trend line and show you how to cope with premature breaks. I hope you enjoy this video.
In this video, I'm going to outline how to use a trend line break in order to take a trade and how to draw a trend line, as well as what to do when it seems like the trend line has been broken. So first thing I should say is that using the trend lines are best used in line with the fundamentals. So you want to trade like a trend line or a trend line break when you have the fundamentals giving you the direction for the trade. So you could have an upside or a downside bias for an instrument, indice or commodity or currency. But either way, use the trend lines in line with a fundamental driver. You don't want to be just purely trading them technically. You want to have a fundamental reason. It could be a central bank decision. It could be a political comment. It could be like in the US election at the moment. And I will show you an example at the end of this of a trade that I've taken, a setup that occurred on a trend line break with the US election. It wasn't one that I personally took. I was already in the trade, but it just gave me confirmation. I'll also show you a Bitcoin trade that I have taken on my own personal account, which turned out to be the best trade of the year for me. So I'll also show that and how a simple trend line break was my trigger for entry. So before we get involved, what is a trend line? A trend line, very simply, is uptrend is a straight line drawn upwards that connects successive reaction lows. You see, this solid line clicks reaction low 1, reaction low 3, reaction low 0.5. Now, this line connects them, and that is an uptrend. Now, in a downtrend, we have a very similar scenario. We have successive rallies at 1, 3 and 5, a line is drawn through the trend line and that connects them together. Now, a trend line is a very valuable tool. It is a very simple tool, but at the same time, it can be also one of the most valuable. Here's an example of a current downtrend we're seeing in the euro-US dollar pair. We can see that this downtrend has been valid for nearly 11 years, starting in August 2008. We have a series of successive lows, and that means that this is a key downtrend, and this level becomes a very key level. You can see price is just wrestling around that level now as we speak. So that is a trend line. Now, how do you draw a trend line? Now, the correct drawing of trend lines is a lot like some other aspects of technical analysis. You can experiment a little. There's some useful guidelines, though, that you need to follow. So, first of all, in order to have evidence of a trend, you've got to have at least 2 reaction lows. So you need to have, it always takes 2 points to draw a straight line. So you need to have a reaction low 1, a reaction low 3. Now, how do you know that that becomes a low in real time? Well, there's 2 ways. One, a break of that successive high, or a move that is the 50% movement of that second to third wave. So once price goes above the 50% point, that would be a legitimate reaction low. Now at this point, when you've got these 2 successive lows, you can tentatively draw an uptrend. However, you only have the confirmation of the trend line when 0.5 confirms it. So 1 and 3, then a 50% retracement of the second to third wave, or taking out that peak at 2. That means you have a potential trend line at that point. Okay. Now in a downtrend, it's exactly the same. You want to have a rally high, and then another lower successive rally. And at this point, once price moves beyond the 50% point of that second to third wave, or takes out that second trough there, you know you have a successive rally peak 1, 2. So that's when you would draw the trend line, when you have those two successive rallies in place. But it's only valid when it's confirmed by 0.5. And once again, you know 0.5 is valid when you've gone through that 50% retracement level or taken out that fourth peak. Now, how do you use a trend line? Well, quite simply, there are two ways to use it. First of all, you can use the trend line as a buying area when you have a retest. So once you've confirmed the trend line, any retracement back to that trend line can become a buying area. Excellent for buying value when you have a conviction of a trade. Similarly, in a downtrend, once you've confirmed that trend line, this becomes a legitimate selling area. So that's the first way, quite obvious, of using a uptrend and a downtrend to buy and sell. Now, what another very, very helpful aspect is using a trend line to signal a trend change. This is a great way. I like to use this. I often use this technique to really a good effect. And often a break of a trend line is the very first signal of a trend change. It can be a very powerful signal. So you can see here at 0.9, when price broke through that trend line, it was a good indication that price has shifted, that the trend has changed. Similarly, in a downtrend, 0.9 gives you good indication that the trend has changed. And obviously taking out these successive peaks here and that successive low there is a really good indication and can let you know a trend has changed and can be a great way of entering on those breaks. So a couple of tips. How do you know how significant a trend line is? Well, how long has it been in place? So you can see here, this trend line has been in place since 2008, over 11 years. So that is a very significant trend line, obviously. Number two, when you're drawing a trend line, try to include all the price action. I find it much, much more helpful to draw a trend line at the extremes of price. So you can see here, I've drawn the trend line at the extreme of price, 1.2. Now, because I've drawn it at the extremes, it means that this doesn't technically touch the trend line, but it's clearly a successive peak. Similarly here, this doesn't touch the trend line, but it is a successive peak. So you can see that the rules aren't always perfectly followed. It's the real world, you know trading. But you can clearly see that this trend line is definitely in place. This doesn't touch the trend line, but I prefer to use that that technique of using the extremes of price. So if and when you do get a break, it is a definite break and it has more conviction. So for instance, I'll show you a gold trade. I was pointing this out to some clients just the day it happened. We're here at the US election and you see this downtrend is in place on the gold market. 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of touches here. And I was saying with the US election, if we get a Biden victory and a likelihood of a Biden victory, we're expecting a trend line break on the gold chart. We've been seeing dollar weakness in the US election. Biden presidency was seen as good for the world, bad for the dollar. The gold lifts on a weak dollar, so anticipating fundamentally gold strength. This was the place to enter, a trend line break, lo and behold, fantastic, a nice, quick, short, sharp rip up higher on that trade there. So that was a really good scenario of a simple trend line break. Fundamentally had a bias to buy gold. You can see here another support level, potentially looking at buying gold could be very good. And it was just a trend line break put me into play. Now I was already in gold from below this trend line. So sometimes when you've got a really good fundamental bias, you can use that trend line to manage your trade. I closed out my gold long simply because of the US election, and we're coming towards the end of it, and I'm nervous of a buy the rumor, sell the fact response. I just want to close all my positions out here on a Friday. Okay, so here's another trade. This happened to be my best trade of the year. One trade that increased my account by 10%, and it was simply a trend line break on Bitcoin. The fundamentals of Bitcoin became very good around early October. We've had growing popularity of Bitcoin. PayPal has been opening access to Bitcoin to its users. We've had a number of large companies talking about Bitcoin Paul Tudor Jones, the hedge fund manager, huge name in hedge fund world. He's been sort of talking and singing the upsides to Bitcoin, and all of a sudden Bitcoin fundamentally has changed from the realm of terrorists and criminals to all of a sudden users of PayPal and hedge fund managers, and reports appearing on Bloomberg Intelligence Report making a case for $100,000 price of Bitcoin, and JP Morgan have been talking about Bitcoin. So the fundamentals changed. It was a different perspective. Could see the change in mood, and lo and behold, what was my trigger? A very simple trend line break. You saw the very simple trend line broken to the upside, change of trend, first indication, stops running below the lows, and you can see, there we go, my best trade of the year. So obviously over the moon with that, closed that out this week around that 1480. You can see the blue line is where I entered, the blue arrow, and the red line is where I closed. So obviously I'm over the moon with that trade. And as a little aside, good little mental note for me, I find that in my trading, my biggest winners are followed by my biggest losers. So I need to forget about trading for a few days and just to allow that to settle in. Okay, I hope that's all been really helpful for you. Don't forget, you can follow me on Twitter, you can follow me on LinkedIn, you can email me at giles.coghlan@hycm.com. I'll just put my Twitter handle. My Twitter handle is, let me just have a quick look at that. You can follow me at Twitter here, Giles Coghlan CCA, and you can follow me along there at Giles Coghlan CCA, and you can also email me, giles.coghlan@hycm.com. And I always like to hear from traders, and if you have anything you'd like to contact me about, please drop me a line, drop me an email, message, and I have put together a program to really help traders take their trading to the next level. So if you'd like to find out more about that program, please do contact me. Okay, thank you all very much, and thank you for listening to this video. If you've liked it, please share it, give it a like, leave a comment, and just try and help promote the channel. That would be much appreciated. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.